what does it gain us to have all the learning in the world and have a hoot full of fun and have all these accomplishments in life that don't mean anything? And we're going to be talking about the fact that, do most of us live like Solomon lived? And we're going to be seeing his perspective when we come back in just a minute. Welcome to Bible Study with Friends. I'm here with my friend Stan Ford. Stan and I are going to continue our study in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes overall is basically the story of life's struggle for contentment. Right. We have to be careful because at the very start, Ecclesiastes, it can really get depressing. Yeah. He really is getting across this idea that so many people try to leave the spiritual aspect of life out. And without God, without the Lord, without Jesus in your life, you struggle and struggle. And this is why we see so many rich, powerful, supposedly happy people depressed or committing suicide or on drugs or whatever it is. We see prevalent in our culture. Wealth does not equate to happiness, and in fact, it can equate to the opposite of happiness. And I think that's where Solomon is going to take us as we go here. So let's go into the scriptures. We're going to pick up in chapter 1, verse 12. In chapter 1, at the first couple verses, he calls himself the preacher. Now, that's not preaching in the sense of being preachy and judgmental. This is preaching from the aspect of teaching. So you could say, I, the teacher. I've got it in my notes there that it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you and I were just living life and we got a note from one of the most powerful CEOs, super rich, a billionaire, and he wrote us a letter that was explaining his life, his accomplishments, his approach to life, we'd pay attention.
Yeah.
And that's what is happening here. When he says, I, the teacher, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. I've been king. And I'm going to tell you now some of the aspects of what I learned as king. Nobody above me. I didn't answer to anybody. I was top dog.
Yeah.
The way you'd hear a CEO saying, I was top guy. Then he goes into, in verse 13, we see a section starting where we see this idea of a personal note of what he has learned. And we see this with these terms. I set my mind, I have seen, I said to myself, I set my mind, I realized, I said to myself, I will test, I said. So this is obviously Solomon giving us a personal viewpoint and a personal observation of what he's learned as king. So let's go into this.
Yeah.
The first thing he says is, I set my mind to seek and explore concerning all that has been done under heaven. Now, we got to be careful here. He's talking about the wisdom that comes from the world, wisdom that comes void of the spiritual aspect.
Yeah, I've got it in my notes here, Lynn, that this wisdom he talks about, it's a worldly wisdom. And if you go over chapter 7, and I forgot what verses it is right now, but the way he talks about wisdom there is completely different than the way he talks about wisdom in this chapter here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a different kind of wisdom. And he's talking about wisdom of what the Bible calls the natural man.
Yeah.
The natural man is the man that he approaches understanding things without God. All right. That's the natural man's viewpoint. And he says, I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under the sun. And then he goes, it is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. Now, what's he talking about there?
I think he's talking about that worldly wisdom, that he's not getting any satisfaction or knowledge, if you want to use that word, as from a worldly perspective.
Yeah, but it's funny that he basically says here, God has given all men this drive to know.
Yeah.
And God has given man a grievous task. It's grievous to say, I want to know. I want to know why. I want to know how. I want to know this. And you leave God out of that equation, and it's a grievous task, and he's going to get to that in a second. Look at the next verse. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Could it be like burdensome?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I have a drive to know, but I'm on my own to know and figure out because God's out of the picture. This is the natural man. Now, read verse 14 to us.
I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind.
Now, we're going to see that phrase a lot.
Yeah.
All is vanity and striving after wind. We talked about it's a waste. It's meaningless. It's here and gone. All right.
Yeah.
Now, what's this striving after wind that we see there? He says, behold, all is a waste, and it's all striving after wind. Now, what do you think he's talking about with striving after wind?
Wind, we can't catch it. We can't grasp it. It's just chasing after something you can't get.
Yeah, it's a lot like in the classic Man of La Mancha, where Don Quixote tilted at windmills. He was fighting the wind, and that was this idea of threatening windmills that were spinning was fighting what you can't see, what you can't grasp, you can't hold on to it. And he says, look at all the works under the sun from the natural perspective. It's like saying, I'm going to catch a breeze in this box. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Later, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, he says the same thing. You got to be born again. The Holy Spirit comes into your life. The wind comes, the wind goes. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but it can impact you.
Yeah.
And here, Solomon is talking about the same sort of thing, that the life observed from the natural perspective is a waste of time. Now, we're going to go on here. In verse 15, this is the observation of looking at life. He says, what is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be counted. So there's things in life that you just can't
straighten out. Yeah.
It's like trying to empty the ocean with a thimble. You're just never going to get there. But you can strive, but you're just never going to get there. There are things that are crooked that can't be straightened, and things that are lacking that you just can't fill without the Lord. And this is that natural perspective. And verse 16 says, I said to myself, so here he's writing to us, but he's saying, hey, I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. That'd be like saying, I got multiple PhDs. I've learned more than anybody around me. And we see the world filled with guys who have PhDs and yet don't have understanding.
Yeah. You know, that the examples of some of that is today, you listen to some of the people who don't know Christ and listen to that wisdom, educated people, and you listen to them and where did that come from?
Yeah. I was listening to a physicist who is an atheist, and they were talking to him about, do you see how in creation there must be a God? There must be a creator. And he said, oh, yeah, I've studied creation and it's amazing. And he says, but it just can't be God. It must be aliens. who came and planted all this stuff. And then he said, where'd the aliens come from? And he says, I don't know, but it can't be God. That's a guy who's got a lot of learning. And this has said, without God, you can have all this learning, magnified and increased wisdom more than all who are around him. And my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Verse 17, I set my mind to know wisdom. And then he says something very interesting. He said, I set my mind, because of all my learning, I set my mind to know wisdom and think about things wisely, and to know madness and folly.
Yeah.
What would be an example in our culture of somebody who says, I want to know madness and folly?
Oh,
I want to experience that. Think of this, Stan, where we have a guy who's a smart guy, and he's successful, and he's really doing good. And as I'm talking, you'll think of people, because there's a lot of them. But he's very successful. He's got a lot of stuff going for him. And yet he decides to experiment with drugs or alcohol. And he gets himself so drunk he can't even think straight, or so stoned that he's literally just out of it.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's talking about here. He says, I've got the knowledge and the education, the learning, and now I'm going to go with the fun. And I'm just going to go until I'm blitzed.
Yeah.
I'm going to go until I'm just out of it. And I'm going to experience smartness. And I'm going to experience just being crazy.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time. We see that with women and men who just waste their life with clubs and drinking and going out every night and getting drunk or stoned, and it's a waste. All right. And he says, because in much wisdom, there is much grief and increasing knowledge. Now, the word in verse 18 that strikes me is the word because.
Yeah.
So he says, I decided to go after folly, craziness, madness, and I realized that even going after so much fun that you're out of your mind with booze or drugs, he says, I realized that this is striving after wind. This is the same as chasing a breeze. You're never going to be stoned enough. You're never going to be crazy enough to be satisfied, to be content.
And that's that worldly wisdom he's talking about in verse 18.
He said, because in much wisdom, there's much grief. So it's like the more I learn, the more I discover how unhappy I am. And he says, increasing knowledge results in increasing pain.
Yeah.
My life is full of pain. And we see all the time athletes, movie stars, entertainers, business people, government workers who get to the top and go, wow, is that all there is?
Yeah.
And they go, there's much grief and there's pain here.
Example, there's a gentleman in this area where I live at that is highly successful, and he sold his company and made millions and millions of dollars. He was a multimillionaire before he even sold it. And at the age of 80, he goes out and starts another business. And it's just that he's striving for something that he's not getting. And I think that's the way Solomon was looking at things here. In fact, in chapter 2, he goes into detail about some of that.
And Jesus in John chapter 12 talks about his peace. He says, peace I give to you, not as the world gives. My peace is different. And Solomon is basically talking here, I achieved all this stuff, but I didn't find peace. I didn't find contentment. In fact, the more I got, the more pain I experienced, because there's no contentment there.
Yeah.
It's like the more learning we have, and even the more fun we have, the more frustrated we can be with, is that all there is?
Yeah.
And again, this is a perspective of a person without God. Now, I want you to flip over, read James chapter 3, 13 to 18.
13. Okay. 13 through 18. Said, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambitions exist, there is disorder and every evil flame. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceful, gentle, responsible, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace.
This is Jesus' half brother, and he's saying the same sort of thing, that if there's a wisdom that comes from below, from here, without God, it's not wisdom.
Yeah.
It's not real wisdom that's going to last, and it's going to give you grief. But wisdom that comes from God is going to give you peace.
Yeah.
And basically, Solomon here is exploring the wisdom available through human learning, through a human perspective, a perspective without God. And he says, all you get is pain. That's all there is there. And then he says in chapter 2, verse 1, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. He says, I couldn't fill my life with enough fun. And we see people doing that today, don't we? The club scene, the party scene, they're trying to fill a void with fun, with pleasure.
Yeah.
That's where I get this title, wasted learning and wasted fun. All right. You just, he said, I decided to test. I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, that too is a waste.
He uses I, myself, my. I think there's probably anywhere from 20 to 30 times in the next 10, 12 verses there.
And he's reinforcing, this is my perspective of what I see here, leaving God out of the picture.
Yeah.
And he said, that's vanity, this pleasure. And he's talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
I tried to fill my life with that. And we see rock stars all the time who commit suicide with that. It's just, you can't get enough pleasure without the Lord. In fact, it says, I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? In other words, I can watch a comedy guy all day long and laugh and laugh and laugh and then instantly be sad.
Yeah, it's a negative effect.
Yeah, and I'm just saying to myself, it's madness. And what does this accomplish? I can't get enough sex, drugs, and rock and roll to accomplish anything. And he's going to explore accomplishments in a second. And he said, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely how to take hold of folly, until I could see what good is there for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their life. So he says, I tried drink, and that would be in today's vernacular. I tried booze and I tried drugs, and I just couldn't get anything good out of that. And then he goes into this section. He says, I enlarged my works. Now, I want to just talk about this just a second here. We're going to talk more about it next week. But I want to talk about this a little bit. I enlarged my works. I built my houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. Look over at the next one. Right here, he says, I made gardens and parks for myself. I planted in them all kinds of trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate. Now, I want to talk about the sentences up to verse 6. What do you notice about what he achieves? All the things he does.
It's materialistic.
It's what? It's materialistic, yes.
Yeah.
But what's the phrase that follows every single accomplishment of his work? For myself.
Yeah.
So where's his focus?
on himself.
He reaffirms that with the purpose for all my accomplishments in work was for myself.
Yeah.
And when I did them, I discovered it's a waste. In fact, if you jump down to verse 11, he said, thus I considered all my activities,
Yeah.
which my hands have done, and the labor which I exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind. There's that phrase again. And there was no profit under the sun. Now, was there profit, money profit? Yes, but it didn't profit his spirit. It didn't profit his mind. There was no profit in accomplishments. Even when he says, I consider all my activities. And verse 10, he says, all that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor. And that was my reward for all my labor, was I was pleased. Yeah. But it wasn't anything that lasted, because he goes right into that he said, I didn't refuse myself anything. And I considered all my activities, and they were a waste. They were trying to catch a breeze in a bag.
Yeah. We can get this way sometimes ourselves. We get self-centered, and like Solomon, for myself, I did this, I did that.
Now we can ask ourselves some tough questions, Stan. Why do I work? You go, what do you mean? Why do I work to live? Well, yes, but why do I strive to accomplish things at work? For myself or for others? Now, the spiritual man, he strives to serve others. And he might work hard to achieve things to serve other people, not to try to get contentment out of what he has done for himself. And we can ask ourselves some really tough questions and think about this. Why do I work? Why do I try to have fun? Why do I try to learn new things? If I have fun or try to learn new things just for myself, for self-gratification, for self-contentment, it's a waste. It's trying to catch a breeze in a bag.
Yeah.
And we'll never get there.
Yeah.
Listen, as we think about these things, they can be life-changing, because they can say, besides all this striving after accomplishments, learning, fun, those kinds of things that are not fulfilling, what else is there? And Solomon, through the book of Ecclesiastes, is going to take us to a fantastic conclusion. And we'll see that. It's a depressing book, because he's ringing it out for us that our minds and our understanding and our striving and all of our work amount to nothing without God.
He was striving for himself and to please himself, and trying to fill that void that a lot of people are doing now, is by the riches, by possessions. And Solomon makes it clear that it's not satisfying. It never lasts.
You could read chapter 1 and into chapter 2 as the story of your life before you were a Christian.
Yeah.
I can say, boy, that sums up all my life before I became a Christian in college. That hit the nail on the head. And Solomon's going to continue to hit that nail as we go. I'd like to recommend that you go to this video right here. It discusses the benefits of knowing Christ. We've been talking about how not knowing Christ and not having a relationship with God is really a waste of time. We'll see you next time. Until then, God bless you.